Change doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door in when it's time. See, people like to think they control the narrative. That transformation is something you can pencil in, plan out, organize by date and time. But real change, it doesn't wait for your approval. It moves like a storm, quiet one moment, overwhelming the next. And when it hits, you either move with it, or you get left behind. Now imagine the world waking up to news that shook the very foundation of its beliefs. Not war, not scandal, but transformation. A man known for pride, wealth, power. The man who built walls, spiritually, emotionally, even literally, suddenly turned toward Mecca, turned toward peace, turned toward something greater than himself. No press conference, no flashy speech, no dramatic moment on stage. Just a whisper between him and the divine. Change didn't ask if the world was ready for it. It just came, and the world wasn't ready. Because the world doesn't like its expectations being shattered, it prefers boxes, categories, this person is this, that person is that. But change doesn't care about your boxes, it doesn't fit into them. It spills out, it surprises, it transforms what was once considered impossible into undeniable truth. One day, the man who once tweeted storms now sits quietly with the Quran in his hand. One day, the one who called for bans now opens doors of understanding. One day, the voice of division speaks words of unity. That's the thing. Change isn't about comfort, it's about courage. It takes guts to turn the page when the whole world is watching. It takes heart to admit you've been wrong. And it takes a whole different kind of strength to bow your head, not in defeat, but in surrender to something higher. That kind of shift, it's not easy, it's not clean. But it's real, and when it's real, it doesn't need permission. People will talk, they'll doubt it, they'll dissect every move. Is it genuine? What's the angle? But truth doesn't need validation, it just is. See, change doesn't wait for the audience to clap. It moves forward anyway. It doesn't wait for polls or approval ratings. It listens to the heart, and when that heart finally hears something greater, something eternal, it moves. Without explanation, without apology, that's when the noise fades and the soul speaks. Change comes for all of us sooner or later. It doesn't care about your name, your status, your past mistakes. When it arrives, the question isn't, are you ready? The question is, will you answer? Because some of the most powerful transformations happen in silence, in solitude, in prayer, and sometimes the person you least expect becomes the example the world never knew it needed. Because change doesn't ask for permission, it just shows up. And you better be ready when it does. Faith levels every playing field. Doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, how high you've climbed, or how far you've fallen. When you stand before God, you're just a soul. No suits, no bank accounts, no resumes, no scandals. Just you, stripped of the world's illusions, and that's what scares people. Because in a world obsessed with hierarchy, with power, with who's on top, faith wipes the board clean and says, start here, start equal. Think about that. A billionaire standing next to a janitor in prayer, no difference, shoulder to shoulder, same words, same direction, same creator. There is no VIP section in faith, no front row seats for the rich, no backstage passes for the famous. Everyone bows the same, everyone stands the same, and that kind of equality, it doesn't sit well with egos. It's uncomfortable to realize your status means nothing when the call to prayer echoes through the air. Your name doesn't matter, your title doesn't matter, only your intention, only your sincerity. That's the power of faith. It humbles the arrogant and uplifts the broken. It takes the one who thought he was too far gone and brings him back with a whisper. And it takes the one who thought he had it all and shows him how empty everything really is without purpose. So when a man who once measured his worth in gold and towers and applause, when that man turns to faith, suddenly the world doesn't know what to do with him. Because he no longer plays by their rules, he's not seeking validation anymore. He's seeking truth, and truth has a funny way of revealing itself when you strip away the noise, the distractions, the applause. Truth comes when you're quiet, when you listen, when you kneel, and in that moment, whether you're rich or poor, loved or hated, powerful or powerless, you're on the same ground as everyone else. One body, one soul, one creator. Faith demands that you come as you are, but not that you stay as you are. It invites you to grow, to change, to cleanse, to return. And the path isn't smoother for the wealthy. It's not easier for the influential. If anything, it's heavier, because they carry more pride, more distractions, more chains, but faith breaks those chains one by one. And that's why the playing field gets leveled. Because faith sees through the image. It sees past the performance. It cuts deep into the heart, into the soul. It doesn't care if you once built walls. It asks if you're ready to tear down the ones inside yourself. It doesn't ask how many enemies you've made. It asks if you're willing to make peace with your own spirit. That kind of leveling force is terrifying for the world because it removes control. You can't manipulate faith. You can't buy it. You can't fake it for long, because eventually it reveals who you really are, and that's the miracle, that's the beauty. The man once judged by millions is now judged only by one. And in that divine court there are no favorites, just truth. Faith is the great equalizer, the place where the powerful kneel, the broken rise, and the proud learn humility. No masks, no stages, just light cutting through the darkness, guiding every soul back to where it truly belongs. Because in the eyes of faith, no one stands taller than the one who bows in sincerity. The loudest fall can be the deepest rise. It's easy to judge a man by his mistakes, by the noise he's made, by the chaos he's caused. But sometimes, the higher someone stands, the more powerful the fall, and the more meaningful the climb back up. Because when a man built on pride, image, and authority comes crashing down, something beautiful can happen. Not in the fall itself, but in what he discovers at rock bottom. See, the world watches the fall like it's entertainment. Headlines, memes, talk shows, they all jump in when someone stumbles. But what the world misses is what happens when the cameras turn off. What happens in the silence, in the shame, in the stillness. That's where the rise begins, in those moments when a man has nothing left to lean on but faith. When the applause is gone, the power's gone, the respect is gone, and all that's left is a soul whispering, "Help me." And sometimes, that whisper is enough. The fall humbles you. It teaches you what success never could. It shows you the faces of those who really care, and those who are only clapping for the mask. And in that moment, when everything breaks, you start to see what's real. You start to hear what you used to drown out. You feel what you used to avoid. And for the first time, you realize that maybe the fall wasn't a punishment. Maybe it was the mercy you didn't know you needed. Because when you've been on top of the world, and suddenly you're not, you either crumble or you surrender. And surrender, when done sincerely, is the beginning of something far greater than any empire you could build. It's the start of becoming whole, of healing, of rising for real. A man who once had the world at his feet finds himself at the feet of his Creator. A man who once lived for applause now cries in the quiet of the night, not for attention, but for forgiveness. That's not weakness, that's power, that's a strength no crowd can give you, because it doesn't come from the outside. It comes from deep within, from the soul that's been cracked open and filled with something eternal. People forget that sometimes the loudest voices are just hiding the deepest pain. The harshest words come from the most wounded hearts, and the strongest masks are worn by the most fragile people. But when the mask falls, when the ego shatters and the real person is left standing in front of the mirror, that's when the truth steps in, and the truth doesn't shame you. It frees you. It calls you to rise, not as who you were, but as who you were always meant to be. So when the world sees a man fall, they may write him off. They may laugh, criticize, point fingers, but what they don't see is the transformation happening in the dark. They don't see the nights filled with prayer, the tears, the regret, the lessons, the growth. They don't see the man finding his way back to purpose. And when he rises different. He rises slower, more grounded, more aware, not to reclaim a throne, but to serve a greater truth, and that kind of rise is deeper than any climb to fame. It's sacred, it's real, it's earned, because sometimes the loudest fall isn't the end of a story, it's the beginning of a resurrection. Redemption begins with humility. Not with speeches, not with grand gestures, not with a carefully crafted image. It begins with a moment, a private, quiet moment when a person stops pretending, stops performing, and finally admits, "I was wrong." That's the birthplace of redemption. It's not loud, it's not polished, it's raw, it's messy, and it's real. Humility is what cracks open the door that ego has kept shut for years. As long as a man believes he's above correction, above growth, above the need to reflect, redemption stays out of reach. But the moment pride breaks, that's when light starts to seep in. That's when healing begins. And it doesn't matter who you are or what you've done. Redemption is always possible when the heart bows first. Imagine a man who's been praised his whole life, who's been told he's the best, the smartest, the strongest, who's lived in a world built around his name, his face, his power. That kind of life doesn't leave much room for humility. Because when everyone's clapping for you, you start to believe you can do no wrong. But deep down in the quiet moments, there's always a whisper that says there's more. A whisper that says you're not whole. And that whisper grows louder when the lights fade, when everything starts to fall apart, when the money, the applause, the control starts slipping. Humility knocks. It doesn't yell. It doesn't demand. It waits. And when a man finally lets it in, he finds something he's never known before: peace. Not the peace that comes from success, but the peace that comes from surrender. To admit fault, to ask for forgiveness, to say, "I need help." These are not signs of weakness. These are signs of strength. Because it takes real courage to lay down your pride, to look at your past and own it fully, to face the people you've hurt, the damage you've done, and choose to be better not for image, but for truth. Redemption doesn't come to the proud. It comes to the broken, and not the kind of broken that makes you bitter, but the kind that makes you open, the kind that says, "I've tried everything else. Now I'm ready to try faith." Because humility is the bridge. It's the path between who you were and who you're meant to be. And here's the thing, nobody can force you to walk that path. You have to choose it, you have to want it, and when you do, when you finally get down off the stage, out of the spotlight, and down on your knees, something changes. The world might not notice right away. They may still hold your past against you. But redemption doesn't depend on them. It depends on the one who sees your heart when nobody else does. So maybe a man who once stood at the center of controversy, who once lived by his own rules, who once thought he was untouchable, maybe that man found humility. Maybe that man bent his head to the ground and found more than forgiveness. Maybe he found purpose. Because once you've tasted what true humility feels like, pride starts to feel like poison. Redemption is not reserved for the saints. It's available to every sinner willing to lay down their pride and pick up sincerity. It doesn't erase the past, but it rewrites the future. And it all begins with a simple, powerful truth. I can't do this alone. That's where the journey back begins, because the road to redemption always starts with the courage to kneel. True change starts with submission, not to people, not to power, not to public opinion, but to something greater, something eternal. Real change doesn't begin when the cameras are rolling or when the world is watching. It begins in that quiet, unseen moment when a person finally lets go of control and says, "I surrender." That's when transformation is born. Not out of force, but out of choice, out of faith. We live in a world where submission is seen as weakness, where control is glorified and surrender is mocked. But the strongest thing a person can do is admit they're not the center of the universe. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. to recognize that there's a creator above all of this, above all of us, and that our lives only find purpose when aligned with that truth. That's where change begins. See, you can change your clothes, your circle, your image. But if your heart's still holding on to ego, nothing real has shifted. Because true change doesn't happen on the surface. It happens in the soul. And the soul only begins to heal when it bows to its origin, to the one who shaped it, to the one who never needed permission to guide it back. A man can have the whole world at his feet and still feel empty inside. He can have power, fame, fortune, and still wake up every morning asking, why doesn't this feel like enough? That question, that ache, it's the beginning, the opening, the invitation to look higher, to look inward, and if he's brave enough, honest enough, broken enough, he'll fall to his knees, not in defeat, but in awakening. That's what submission is. It's the moment you stop fighting the truth. The moment you realize you've been running, hiding, building walls, and that none of it brought peace, so you stop, you breathe, you bow, and in that moment the chains start to fall, the chains of pride, of fear, of arrogance, of identity that's been shaped by the wrong things. You start to see clearly, not through the eyes of the world, but through the lens of truth. You realize that every success without purpose was just noise. That every argument, every chase for validation, every attempt to prove something, it all fades in the presence of real peace, and that peace only comes through submission. It's not easy. Submission requires you to admit that you don't have all the answers, that your plans aren't always right, that your strength isn't always enough. But in that surrender, you find something far greater than control. You find clarity. You find alignment. You find God. And when a man who once lived by his own rules starts living by divine guidance, everything changes. Not just how he talks or dresses or prays, but how he treats people, how he sees the world, how he carries himself. That's not a surface-level change. That's a shift in the soul. That's a transformation rooted in truth. And people might not understand it, they might doubt it, but the man who submits doesn't live for their approval. He lives for something higher. He walks a new path, one that's not driven by pride, but by peace, not powered by image, but by intention. Because the greatest transformation doesn't begin when you rise to power. It begins when you fall and choose to bow, and from that bow, a new life begins, real, grounded, eternal. Because true change doesn't come from trying to be better than others. It comes from finally letting God make you better than you were. The past doesn't define the future. It doesn't matter who you used to be, what mistakes you made, how loud your failures echoed. None of that has to control what comes next. The world may try to chain you to your past, remind you of it every chance it gets, but the truth is, the door to the future remains open. Always, and it only takes one step through that door to begin again. People love to bring up who you were. They don't always care about who you're becoming. But growth isn't a performance, and redemption isn't a show. It's a journey, a quiet, difficult, personal walk towards something greater, and the beginning of that walk, it starts when you decide that your past no longer owns you, that you've outgrown the version of yourself that the world keeps trying to hold on to. We all have chapters we don't read out loud, but they're part of the story. You can't erase them, but you don't have to be defined by them, because it's not about the fall, it's about what you do after you hit the ground. Do you stay down, or do you get up and write a new page? Imagine a man known for division, for ego, for controversy. A man whose name was tied to headlines, opinions, and endless debate. That man standing before his creator, not as a brand, not as a politician, not as a businessman, but as a soul. A flawed, fragile, searching soul. And in that moment, the past doesn't matter. Only the choice in front of him. Only the sincerity in his heart. Because God doesn't look at where you've been. He looks at where you're going. That's the beauty of faith. It doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't expect a flawless record. It asks for one thing, a genuine heart that's ready to change, and once that spark is lit, the transformation begins. Not all at once, not with a switch, but with a series of choices that add up to a new life, a better life, a life filled with purpose instead of pride. The world may try to cancel you, but God offers a clean slate. The world may throw labels, judgments, reminders of every wrong move, but faith whispers you're not finished. Because when the heart turns, the path clears, and no amount of public opinion can block the grace that's been written for you. Change is possible for anyone, no matter the name, the history, the baggage. That's not just hope, that's truth. And the moment a person realizes that, everything shifts. They stop living for applause. They stop fighting ghosts. They stop trying to prove something to people who never believed in them to begin with. They start living for the one who always sees the potential buried beneath the pain. And maybe, just maybe, the one the world thought was least likely to change becomes the one who inspires others to believe that change is possible. Maybe the one who was once the loudest voice of division becomes a quiet example of transformation. Maybe the past becomes the proof, not of shame, but of how far someone can come. Because no matter what you've done, your next choice still belongs to you. And the most powerful sentence you'll ever write begins with these 4 words: I am not done,